The billionaire's dog escorted a blind judge to the scene of truth. If you believe that truth always finds its way back, stay until the end. Because tonight, justice will walk on four legs. The rain fell in long silver threads over the quiet lake, whispering against the wooden planks of an old bridge. Somewhere beyond the fog, a single figure stood still, his hand gripping a white cane, his face turned toward the sound of water. His name was Elias Hastings, once one of the most respected judges in New York, now a man who had not seen light for 5 years. The world to him was made of sound, the soft splash of waves below, the creak of wet wood beneath his boots, and the steady breath of the golden retriever by his side. The dog's name was Atlas. Trained by the late billionaire Alistair Grant's foundation, Atlas had become more than a guide dog. He was Elias's eyes, his compass, his only link to the world beyond darkness. Tonight, Atlas was restless. His leash trembled in Elias's hand as the animal pulled forward, nose raised, tail rigid. "Easy, boy," Elias murmured, the words quiet against the wind. But Atlas barked once, sharply, the sound echoing over the water. The judge hesitated, his senses sharpening. There was something different in the air, something metallic, faintly sour, mixed with rain and mud. He crouched, fingers brushing the edge of the wooden railing. The surface was splintered, broken. The shape of the damage told a story, but not the one he remembered from the police report. In that report, the accused woman Marina Ortiz had supposedly pushed her co-worker from this very bridge during an argument, but the tear pattern beneath his fingers curved the wrong way. If she had shoved him, the wood would have split outward. This damage curved inward, as if a car, not a hand, had hit the railing from the road above. Atlas whined, nudging his shoulder. Elias's breath caught as he listened closer. Far off, through the rain, came the echo of tires on wet pavement, and a sound he would never forget. A short, high-pitched screech of brakes, the kind that etched itself into a man's memory. He had heard that same sound on a recording in the courtroom years ago, dismissed as background noise. But standing here, in the damp night, he knew better. That sound did not belong to the lake. It belonged to the truth. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a small recorder. His fingers found the worn button by touch alone. "Audio log," he said quietly. Date April 15th. Location Grant Lake Bridge. Observed anomaly. Fracture of wood inconsistent with human force. Atlas indicates distress. Possible vehicular involvement. The rain grew heavier. Atlas barked again, dragging Elias a few steps forward. Something soft brushed the judge's boot. He bent down, tracing it with his fingers a torn piece of fabric, damp and smelling faintly of lavender. He slipped it into a plastic pouch inside his coat. "Good boy," he whispered. "You found something." Atlas wagged his tail once and pressed against his leg as thunder rolled across the sky. Elias stood, the lines of his face carved deep by age and regret. His voice was almost a whisper when he spoke again. "I think we came here for a reason, Atlas. Someone was framed. And maybe, just maybe, we can still put it right." The dog lifted his head, ears twitching toward the distant lights of the city, waiting for the next command. Elias adjusted his grip on the cane and turned toward the faint echo of car tires on the highway. "Let us go home," he said. "Tomorrow, we start listening for the truth." Pie! And as the rain washed the bridge clean, the blind judge and the billionaire's dog disappeared into the mist toward a truth that had waited too long to be seen. Now, let us return to the main character. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us continue the story. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the air sharp with the smell of wet pine and asphalt. Elias Hastings sat in his small apartment overlooking Grant Lake, the blinds half drawn against a sky that was too bright for a man who could no longer see. On the table beside him lay the evidence from the night before, a plastic pouch with a torn lavender cloth and his old recorder, still damp but intact. Atlas, the golden retriever, rested at his feet, head on his paws, as if waiting for a verdict. Elias replayed the recording through an earpiece, listening not with his ears alone but with his memory, the echo of rain, the creak of the bridge, the faint hum of tires. Every sound painted a picture more vivid than sight. For years he had told himself that his blindness was punishment for trusting paper over instinct, for believing in the precision of reports and not the weight of human truth. Yet last night had stirred something he thought he had buried the urge to question again. He turned the fabric between his fingers. The scent of lavender lingered, clean and calm, a scent too gentle to belong in a crime scene. He leaned forward, voice low. Someone left this behind, and Atlas chose it. The dog lifted his head at his name, tail brushing the floor once in silent acknowledgement. That afternoon, Elias made his way to the Guide Vision Rehabilitation Center, the place that maintained Atlas's training. The center was part of the foundation, built by the late billionaire Alistair Grant, whose goal was to match highly trained service dogs with people rebuilding their lives. Elias visited every month for progress checks, but today he carried something heavier than routine. The reception smelled faintly of disinfectant and freshly brewed coffee. He recognized the soft rhythm of paws on the tile before he heard a woman's voice, steady, calm, kind. Easy now. Steady, good boy. Feel the ground before you step. It was Marina Ortiz, though he did not know her yet. Her voice carried the same quiet patience that good trainers had the tone of someone who had learned to earn trust, not demand it. She guided another golden retriever past him, her steps light but confident. "Mr. Hastings," greeted Nina Alvarez, the program director, with a firm voice and quick stride. "Back for Atlas's evaluation?" "Yes," Elias replied. "But I would also like to ask a few questions about something I found last night, near the bridge." Nina hesitated, then led him to her office. The soundproof door clicked shut behind them. "The bridge?" she asked slowly. "That is the site of the Ortiz case, is it not?" "That is correct," Elias said. "A piece of fabric. Lavender. Atlas found it. Does the name Ortiz mean something to you?" Nina's voice softened. "Marina Ortiz was one of our best volunteers before everything. She was accused of manslaughter 2 years ago. Served time until new evidence allowed a temporary release. She has been rebuilding her life here." Elias leaned back, processing the words. "And she works with dogs." "Yes. She trains them to guide others. Some would call that ironic. I call it grace." Outside the glass wall, Elias could hear Atlas bark once, and a woman's gentle laugh followed. That same lavender scent drifted faintly into the room. He turned his face toward the sound, instinct catching up with understanding. "That is her, is it not?" he asked quietly. Nina hesitated again, then nodded, though he could not see it. "Yes, that is Marina." Elias rose slowly, fingers brushing the recorder in his coat pocket. The name echoed through him like a bell. He had read her case file long ago, back when he still believed the law could separate guilt from grief. But now, standing in the hum of the rehabilitation center, he began to wonder if the truth had been blinded by something far greater than darkness. "Perhaps," he said softly, "it is time I learned to see differently." Outside, Atlas nudged Marina's hand, and for a brief second, the blind judge and the accused woman stood in the same light, neither aware yet how deeply their lives were already entwined. The afternoon sun warmed the glass walls of the Guide Vision Rehabilitation Center, flooding the training room with soft light. The air smelled faintly of dog shampoo and lavender disinfectant. Elias Hastings stood near the entrance, his hand resting lightly on Atlas's leash as he listened to the rhythm of the room footsteps, the jingle of collars, the low hum of calm voices. He could tell which trainers were confident by the sound of their steps, steady and measured. And then there was one voice that rose above the others, gentle but firm, patient yet strong. Marina Ortiz. "Hold the leash higher," she instructed a trainee, her tone carrying both grace and authority. "Do not drag. Let the dog feel you, not your control." Elias tilted his head. The voice carried the same kindness he had heard through the glass yesterday. Without sight, he relied on instinct, and something about her tone felt strangely familiar, as if it belonged to a memory he could not name. Nina approached with her usual briskness. "Mr. Hastings," she said quietly, "Marina will help you with Atlas's advanced reorientation test today. She is the best at reading the dog's emotional cues. Would that be all right?" Elias nodded. "If she can teach Atlas, perhaps she can teach me." "Oh, When Marina walked over, her footsteps paused a moment before reaching him, as if she too needed to steady herself. "Good morning, Mr. Hastings," she said softly. "It is an honor to meet you. I have heard Atlas is one of our most responsive guides." Her words carried no trace of bitterness, no edge of the past that had shadowed her name. Elias extended his hand, and after a slight hesitation, she shook at her grip warm, surprisingly steady. Atlas leaned against her leg, tail brushing her jeans like a signal of recognition. "He remembers you," Elias said, smiling faintly. "That is not something he does often." Marina crouched to stroke the dog's fur. I met him once, before everything changed. Dogs remember kindness, even when people forget. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the quiet panting of Atlas. Then Marina stood and reached for Elias's cane. "Shall we begin?" They walked together along the indoor obstacle course. Marina guided him with verbal cues instead of touch, her voice a calm thread leading him through each turn. Step left. 3 paces forward. Now stop. Feel the air, do you notice the shift? He did. A subtle draft, cooler on one side. There is an open door, he guessed. Exactly, she said, her tone brightening. That is how the dog knows to guide you around it. It is not sight, it is sense. Her words stayed with him. Not sight, sense. When they finished, Marina removed the harness and knelt beside Atlas, praising him softly. Elias heard the faint tremor in her breath when she said his name again. It was the sound of someone holding back emotion, someone who had lived too long under the weight of judgment. As they rested by the benches, Elias finally asked, "Marina, do you believe everyone deserves a second chance?" She looked at him, eyes reflecting the golden light that filled the room. "I think everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are," she replied. "The problem is, the world does not always look long enough." Elias nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is why I lost my sight, to finally learn how to look properly." Marina smiled faintly, not realizing how literal his words were. The air between them softened. Atlas nudged her knee, as if urging her to stay. Later that evening, as Elias packed his things, he slipped the lavender fabric from his pocket. The scent was stronger now, clearer in the warm air of the training room. He turned it over in his hands, his thoughts caught between recognition and denial. He knew he had felt this same texture before in an evidence bag years ago, but that case had ended long before she ever entered his life. Or so he thought. From across the room, Marina's voice called out a quiet goodbye. Elias's reply caught in his throat. Something was connecting them beyond chance, a bridge of memory, guilt, and truth not yet spoken. Atlas gave a low bark, as if confirming what neither of them dared to say out loud. And in that still moment, beneath the hum of the fluorescent lights, the blind judge began to see the outline of the truth waiting in the dark. The next morning began with the hum of city traffic outside Elias Hastings's apartment. The sunlight pushed through the thin curtains, warm against the walls that had long forgotten color. Atlas lay near the door, his tail flicking in half-dreams. The apartment smelled of coffee and paper, the familiar comfort of a man who once lived by case files and verdicts. Elias sat at his desk, the recorder beside him, his fingers tracing the smooth casing as if it were a talisman. He had not been able to stop thinking about Marina Ortiz since their session at the Guide Vision Center. Her voice, calm and unguarded, had stayed with him long into the night. She spoke like someone who carried her own scars yet still believed in healing others. He opened a digital file on his computer, using the screen reader to navigate. The mechanical voice filled the silence. Cases Ortiz, Marina, year 2021. The sound made his stomach tighten. It had been years since he heard that name in an official record, yet it felt freshly written. The report was clinical, detached. Victim male, 28. Death by fall from bridge. Suspect female coworker, Marina Ortiz. Motive dispute over project funding. But the words that followed made him pause. Evidence includes torn lavender fabric from suspect's coat. Elias's hand froze. The same scent now rested on his table in a sealed pouch. He leaned back, pressing his fingertips to his forehead. "Atlas," he whispered, "what have we stepped into?" The dog's ears twitched, his eyes alert. Elias could almost feel the tension ripple through the animal. He picked up the phone and dialed Nina Alvarez. "Nina," he said when she answered, "I need to ask you something about Marina's case." Her voice came cautious. "Mr. Hastings, I thought you might. What is it? Where did the evidence come from? The lavender cloth, was it ever confirmed as part of her coat?" There was a pause, then a quiet exhale. The record said it matched by pattern, not by thread count. The test was rushed. Some files were sealed when the prosecution dropped the secondary charge. Why? Elias hesitated. "Because I have the other half. Atlas found it at the bridge 2 nights ago." The line went silent. Finally, Nina spoke again, softer. "Mr. Hastings, are you sure?" "I do not make claims I cannot prove," he said, "but I believe someone used her name to hide their own guilt. I need your help, Nina. Do you still have access to the training logs for that year?" "I can check," she said, "but please be careful. Reopening old wounds is not the same as healing them." When he hung up, Elias turned to Atlas, who was now sitting upright, waiting. It seems, old friend, that we are no longer just chasing memories. Arda. Later that day, he returned to the center under the pretext of another training session. Marina was outside, walking two younger dogs around the garden path. Her long dark hair caught the wind, brushing against her shoulders. When she saw Elias, she smiled but hesitated, as if unsure whether to greet him or retreat. "You came back," she said. "I had questions," he admitted. "Do you mind if we walk?" They followed the stone path that circled the fountain. Birds gathered on the rim, fluttering at the sound of Atlas's collar. "I looked up your case," Elias said finally. "You must hate hearing that, but I needed to understand." Marina's steps slowed. "And what did you find?" That nothing about it made sense. The evidence was incomplete, and the story felt rewritten. She laughed bitterly. "That is what I told them, too. But who listens to a woman already labeled guilty?" Elias stopped, turning his face toward her voice. "I will." The air fell still. Marina's eyes softened, the anger in her expression dimming into something more fragile. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because I used to believe justice was blind," he said. "Now I know blindness can be the only way to see clearly." Atlas barked once, startling the birds into flight. Marina looked at the dog, then back at Elias. "If you really want the truth," she whispered, "meet me tomorrow night. There is something I never told anyone." As she walked away, the lavender scent trailed faintly behind her, the same scent that had haunted his dreams. Elias stood still, hearing the echo of her footsteps fade, and knew that tomorrow would bring either redemption or another verdict waiting to be overturned. The next evening arrived with the kind of stillness that carried both promise and dread. Elias Hastings waited outside the Guide Vision Center, the cool air thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Atlas stood beside him, alert and patient. Across the parking lot, the lights from the main building spilled across the asphalt, turning every puddle into a mirror of gold. Marina Ortiz appeared from the shadows of the walkway, her hair tied loosely, her expression uncertain. She carried a folder under one arm, clutched as if it were both shield and confession. "You came?" she said softly. "I gave you my word," Elias replied, "and I intend to keep it." They walked toward a small bench near the training field, the grass glistening with dew. Atlas settled between them, resting his chin on his paws. Marina opened the folder, the paper edges trembling slightly in her hands. "These are copies of the reports from my case," she said. "Not the ones the court saw, the originals that were supposed to stay sealed. I got them from a friend who worked in evidence before the department shut him out." "Come, fool." Elias leaned forward, his hand tracing the edge of a document she placed in his palm. "Describe it to me," he said quietly. "There are photographs," Marina began, her voice low. "The night of the accident. The railing was broken in the same spot you described to me yesterday. But look here, there is a tire mark across the planks. You can see the pattern from a car, not shoes. They ignored it because it did not fit their story." Elias's jaw tightened. "And the lavender fabric?" She took a breath, steadying herself. "It was part of a scarf, not a coat. I lost it weeks before that night. Someone must have taken it from the shelter where I used to leave my things. I told them, but no one listened." He ran his thumb across the paper, listening as if the truth itself could be heard in her voice. The evidence aligned with everything his instincts had whispered at the bridge. "Marina," he said, "why did you never appeal?" She looked away. "Because by the time I was released, my lawyer was gone, the witnesses had disappeared, and I was tired of fighting. I thought maybe silence would set me free." Elias turned his face toward her, his expression softened by something close to pain. "Silence does not free the innocent. It only comforts the guilty." For a long moment neither spoke. The only sound was the rustle of Atlas's fur as he lifted his head, sensing the tension between them. Marina folded the papers carefully and handed them to Elias. "If you truly believe what you said about seeing differently," she whispered, "then help me prove it. Not for me, so that the next person does not lose years to a lie." Elias took the folder. "I will need access to the official recordings from the night of the accident. Do you remember who handled the surveillance tapes?" She nodded slowly. "A man named Victor Lang. He was part of the company that owned the construction site near the bridge. He disappeared after the trial." "Then that is where we start," Elias said. "Truth has a way of finding people, even those who try to outrun it." Marina smiled faintly. "And what if the truth finds us first?" Elias almost smiled. "Then we will face it together." As they stood to leave, Atlas nudged Marina's hand with his nose, the simple gesture grounding them both in the moment. She knelt to pet him, whispering something Elias could not hear. The dog responded with a soft, contented sigh. When she rose, her eyes met his. "Thank you, Judge Hastings," she said. "Do not call me Judge," he replied quietly. "Not until I earn the right to the title again." They walked back toward the parking lot, their reflections moving across the puddles side by side, two figures bound by guilt, loss, and the fragile hope that truth might still heal what the world had broken. That night, long after Marina left, Elias sat in silence beside Atlas, the folder open on his desk. The sound of rain returned, tapping softly on the windows, like a reminder from the past. He pressed the recorder's button and spoke, his voice calm but firm. Audio log. Evidence suggests fabrication. The truth is no longer hidden. It is simply waiting for someone brave enough to see it. Atlas shifted closer, his head resting against Elias's leg. Outside, the streetlights flickered like small promises in the dark, and for the first time in years, the blind judge felt the weight of purpose again. The morning light crept through thin clouds, spilling across the quiet streets of the city. Elias Hastings sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. The folder Marina Ortiz had given him the night before lay open, its contents carefully arranged in front of him. The smell of paper and ink mingled with the faint scent of lavender that clung to the torn fabric sealed inside a plastic pouch. Atlas sat by his feet, ears twitching with each turn of a page. Elias's hand moved slowly over the reports, tracing the ridges of the embossed letters. Tire marks, altered testimony, missing witness, he murmured to himself. Each detail deepened his conviction that Marina had been caught in someone else's web. He pressed the recorder's button. Audio log. Further evidence of inconsistency. The reports were either falsified or prematurely closed. Motivation for concealment remains unclear, but suspicion points toward corporate interference. He paused. Victor Lang may hold the key. When he arrived at the Guide Vision Center later that morning, Nina Alvarez was already waiting for him at the entrance. Her tone was firm, but her eyes showed quiet worry. "I heard you have been asking questions again, Elias. People are noticing. They do not like old cases being stirred up." "I do not care who likes it," Elias replied. "A woman's life was stolen from her. I will not let silence finish the job." Nina sighed. "Then at least let me help. I checked the records you asked about. The audio from the surveillance near the bridge still exists, but it is stored under restricted access. It will take me time to retrieve it." "How long?" "Maybe a few days," she said. "And there is something else. Victor Lang did not just disappear. He filed for bankruptcy 6 months after the trial, then changed his name. He is now a contractor for the same company that sponsors our center." Elias's jaw tightened. Then the same money that trained Atlas also buried the truth. Before Nina could answer, Marina walked into the hallway, holding a leash and a training harness. Her long dark hair was tied back, and the morning light caught in her eyes. She stopped when she saw them together. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Elias hesitated. "We found a lead. The man who handled the surveillance recordings now works under a new name. Nina and I plan to verify his connection to the bridge case." Marina's voice dropped to a whisper. "You mean Victor Lang?" Elias nodded. "You knew him?" Her hands tightened on the leash. "He was my supervisor before the accident. He told me to meet him at the bridge that night. He said he had proof someone was stealing from the project fund. But when I arrived, he was gone. Minutes later, I heard a crash." Elias felt the air leave his lungs. "So it was a setup." Marina looked away, her voice shaking. "He called me 2 days later and said not to contact him again. The next week, the police came for me. Every piece of evidence they found could be traced back to his access." Nina's voice was steady now. "That explains why the construction company wanted this buried." Elias turned toward the sound of Marina's breathing. "We can still expose it. If we can prove that Lang tampered with the report, the state will have to reopen the case." Marina shook her head. "I cannot go through another trial." "You will not be alone," Elias said. "You have Atlas, you have Nina, and you have me." For the first time, Marina met his eyes fully, as if daring to believe him. The light caught in her tears, but her voice was strong when she answered. "Then we start tonight." Odie. That evening, the three of them gathered in the small conference room of the center. Nina's laptop glowed softly in the dark, casting pale light across their faces. She slid a flash drive into the port. "This is the audio from the night of the accident," she said. "It took some work to get it, but here it is." Elias leaned closer, headphones over his ears. The recording hissed, then came alive. Wind, rain, the hum of an engine. Suddenly, the sound of brakes, long, high, and desperate, filled the room. "That is it," he whispered. "The sound I heard at the bridge." But beneath the screech of tires came another noise. Faint but unmistakable, a man's voice shouting, "Lang, get back!" followed by a sharp crash and silence. Marina covered her mouth. "He was there," she said, trembling. Elias removed the headphones, his voice low but sure. "Now we have proof. Tomorrow, the truth begins to speak." Lokol. Atlas barked once, the sound echoing like a promise in the quiet room. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, and for the first time, Elias felt that the darkness might finally start to lift. The next day came with a restless energy that neither Elias Hastings nor Marina Ortiz could ignore. The recording from the night before still echoed in their minds, the screech of brakes, the voice shouting a warning, and the crash that had rewritten both of their lives. It was no longer speculation. Victor Lang had been there, and his voice was now their only proof. Inside the small office at the Guide Vision Center, Nina Alvarez paced with her phone pressed to her ear. "The lab can authenticate the voice," she said, "but it will take at least 48 hours. I am trying to push it faster." Elias sat near the window, his fingers steepled in concentration. Atlas rested at his feet, tail twitching whenever the judge's tone deepened. "Lang will not wait 2 days," Elias said. "Once he realizes someone has reopened the file, he will vanish again." Marina stood beside the desk, arms crossed, her expression torn between fear and defiance. "He works under a new identity now," she said. "If he feels cornered, he might come after us. He knows I survived because of that file." Elias turned his head toward her voice. "You have nothing to fear as long as the truth is on our side, but we must act first." "No quo." Nina ended her call and turned toward them. "I can reach a journalist at the city paper," she said. "He owes me a favor. If we release even part of the audio, it will force the authorities to look again." Marina hesitated. Public attention could destroy the center's reputation. Elias's voice was calm but steady. "Reputation means nothing if it shelters injustice. We tell the truth, no matter what follows." That afternoon, Nina arranged a private meeting at a quiet cafe downtown. The plan was simple: deliver the audio copy to the journalist, ensure it reached the right hands, and prepare for the fallout. But simplicity never lasts long when truth is involved. They arrived at the cafe before dusk. The place smelled of roasted coffee beans and rain-soaked concrete. Elias sat near the corner table, listening to the door. Atlas rested beside him, watchful. Marina sat across from him, the flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. Minutes later, a man approached their table, a tall figure with a familiar voice. "I was told you wanted to talk about the bridge case." Marina froze. The voice was the same one from the recording. "Victor," she whispered. Lang smiled faintly, lowering his sunglasses. "You should have stayed quiet, Marina. Some stories are better buried." Elias straightened in his chair. "And yet you came," he said. "That means guilt still follows you." Lang's smirk faltered. "You do not know what you are walking into, Judge Hastings." "On the contrary," Elias replied, his tone cold and even. "For the first time, I do." Lang's hand twitched toward his jacket pocket, but Atlas growled low, a warning deep in his throat. The sound froze the air. Lang hesitated, then turned sharply and left through the back door, disappearing into the rain. Marina's breath shook. "He is afraid," she said. Elias nodded. "Fear is what guilty men feel when truth finds its way back." 1. Nina appeared moments later, the journalist at her side. "Did he show up?" "Yes," Elias said quietly. "And he confirmed everything we needed to know." He handed the flash drive to the journalist. "This belongs in the light." As they watched the man leave with the evidence, Elias exhaled deeply. Atlas nuzzled his hand, sensing the storm that was still to come. "Tonight," Elias said, "we wait. Tomorrow, justice begins to speak aloud." Ardo. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, and for the first time, it sounded less like a threat and more like a warning to those who had tried to bury the truth. The storm rolled through the night, washing the city clean. By morning, the news had already broken. The local paper carried the headline in bold letters: "New evidence emerges in the Ortiz case." The story spread fast: an old recording, an anonymous source, and the voice of a man thought long gone. The name Victor Lang was everywhere. At the Guide Vision Center, the phones rang nonstop. Reporters waited outside the gates, shouting questions through the rain. Nina Alvarez kept the staff calm while Elias Hastings sat quietly in the conference room, hands folded over his cane. Atlas lay beside him, patient and silent. Across the table, Marina Ortiz read the printed article, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned each page. "They know everything," she said softly. "My name, the trial, even where I work." Elias nodded. "It was inevitable. Truth cannot stay hidden forever. What matters now is what we do with it." Nina entered the room, closing the door behind her. "The police just contacted me," she said. "They want to meet with us this afternoon. They are reopening the investigation." Marina looked up in disbelief. "After all these years?" "They have the audio file," Nina said. The voice was confirmed. "It is Lang." Elias exhaled slowly. "Then justice is finally awake." Trepter. Hours later, they stood once more near the old Grant Lake Bridge, now closed off by yellow police tape. The air was cold and sharp, the smell of wet wood rising from below. Detectives examined the railing while Elias stood still, his hand resting on Atlas's head. "This is where it began," he said quietly, "and this is where it ends." Marina stepped beside him, her long dark hair brushing her coat as she looked out at the water. "It feels smaller than I remember," she whispered. "Truth always does," Elias replied. "It is never as loud as lies, but it lasts longer." One of the officers called out to them, "Mr. Hastings, we found something underneath the bridge." Elias listened as footsteps hurried past. Moments later, the officer returned holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a broken car mirror, its frame chipped, streaked with paint the same color as the construction company's vehicles. Marina's breath caught. "That is it. That was never in the report." "Chuko." Elias nodded. "Because someone removed it. Lang must have hidden it after the crash." The detective's voice carried a note of finality. "With this, the case changes. We will issue a warrant." Elias lifted his face toward the wind. "Atlas led us here first," he said. "He knew what the rest of us refused to see." Marina looked at the dog, smiling through tears. He just followed what was true. "RD Twin?" As the police packed their evidence and the rain began again, Elias recorded one final note into his device. "Audio log," he said. "Recovered physical proof confirms theory of vehicular impact. Subject, Victor Lang. Justice delayed, but not denied." Atlas barked once, his tail brushing against Elias's leg like a quiet salute. When they turned to leave, Marina paused to touch the wooden railing. "Thank you," she whispered, though she was not sure to whom, the judge, the dog, or the universe that had finally decided to listen. And as they walked away from the bridge, the sky broke open above them, light pouring through the clouds like an unspoken verdict. 1 year later, the city moved slower, as if it too had learned to breathe again. The air outside the Atlas Foundation for Justice and Accessibility carried the scent of spring clean rain and blooming magnolias. A banner stretched across the front of the glass building, Grand Opening Ceremony. Beneath it, people gathered, reporters, volunteers, and those whose lives had been touched by the fight for truth. Inside, Elias Hastings stood near the podium. His hair had grown whiter, but the calm in his posture spoke of peace rather than age. Atlas, now slightly grayer around the muzzle, lay beside him in quiet pride, wearing a blue vest embroidered with the Foundation's emblem. The microphone buzzed softly as Elias placed his hands on the podium and began to speak. 1 year ago, he said, his voice steady but warm, we stood at a bridge and listened to the sound of truth returning. We learned that justice is not blind, it simply waits for those who will see it with their hearts. The crowd fell silent. Marina Ortiz stood among them, dressed in a pale lavender blouse, the color echoing the torn fabric that had once condemned her. Her eyes glistened, not with sorrow, but with something brighter, acceptance. Beside her, Nina Alvarez smiled quietly, pride softening her usual sharp edges. Elias continued, "This foundation exists because of compassion. It exists because one woman believed in redemption, one friend believed in courage, and one faithful soul," he paused, resting a hand on Atlas's head, "never stopped leading us toward the light." The audience applauded. Atlas wagged his tail once, as if understanding his part in the story. When the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed into the courtyard. The air hummed with conversation and laughter. Marina approached Elias, holding a small wooden box in her hands. "I wanted you to have this," she said softly. Inside the box lay the lavender fabric, now clean, pressed, and framed under glass. It started with this. It should end with it. Elias smiled. "Then let it remind us that even broken things can hold the shape of truth." She laughed quietly. "You sound like a judge again." He shook his head. "Not a judge, Just a man still learning how to see. As the afternoon sun warmed the courtyard, Atlas barked, drawing a few amused smiles. Marina knelt to stroke his fur. He still remembers the lake, she said. He remembers everything that matters, Elias replied. They walked together toward the entrance, passing a plaque mounted near the door. The inscription read, "Dedicated to all who were unseen, unheard, and misunderstood, until kindness led them home." For a moment, they stood there in silence, both aware of how far they had come from the bridge that had once broken their lives. Elias turned toward Marina. "You know," he said, "in another life, I might have sentenced you." Marina smiled. "And in this one, you set me free." "Want?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver dog whistle, the same one Atlas had worn during training. "I thought you should have this," he said. "It will always bring him back to you." She took it, her eyes shining. "It already has." The wind carried the sound of laughter through the courtyard as the blind judge and the once accused woman stood together, united by the truth they had both fought to reclaim. And as the sun slipped behind the city skyline, the golden retriever raised his head toward the light, a living reminder that even in darkness, the path to justice will always lead home.